another edition of the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Andrew Calista, Mike Gross of the Gross Rational Product, and Frank Bodani of the York Daily Record. Couple longtime Penn State beat reporters, and now joining that circus of Penn State media folks, Landon Tengwall entering year number 2, former Penn State offensive lineman, now I guess I could say social media superstar, just taking over as like a player perspective. Landon Tengwall of Behind the Wall joining us. Landon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. What was going on in your head when you thought, I'm a former player, let me enter to the dark side of sports writing covering Penn State?
Well, I was going through that time period of, I thought maybe I was even 6 months away from possibly being able to go to the league. Who knows what happened. And it was kind of that, oh, crap, I retired. What the heck am I going to do with my life? Thankfully, I was a broadcast journalism major. So that's kind of where it started. I like to talk a lot. Shout out to Mike Poorman was one of my professors. So, yeah, wow. I knew that was going to get a reaction right there. Shout out Poorman. Really it was my girlfriend, Sarah Jackson, daughter of Kenny Jackson. And she said to me, what do you like to do? And I said, I like my Com 360 class. And it was it's this like news broadcast class. So I got hooked up doing some local radio on Fox News here. And I was doing that actually during the 2023 season, right when I retired. And it was something pretty low key. I think a lot of people didn't even know I was doing it, but it was just about kind of getting those reps in. And I didn't have plans at that time to do this. It was kind of just like, hey, that's something to do and put some time into. And I had some good feedback from it. So then it was that following spring of 2024. And I think it was after the blue-white game. Someone made a cut up of Drew Aller, and it was like all his bad passes. And if you remember, it was very windy and, blocked for him. So I came to his defense. I made a cut up of good passes. And that was kind of like me coming out of the dark. I went like incognito mode for like 8 months on social media and all that stuff. And I kind of came out. And then a big piece of what I started doing was getting to know a lot of these lettermen, doing interviews with them, different players, former coaches. I've had Spider Caldwell on a million times. And then it kind of just eked into the season. And I'm like, well, season's here. So let me just start covering pregame, postgame, film breakdowns, all that good stuff. And I got addicted to it. I'll tell you what, I guess I like to talk a lot. I like to hear myself, and I try to be right from time to time.
Landon, do you like talking more or blocking? Give me the.
Well, talking feels a lot better on the body. So yeah. I think I might go with talking, considering the shoulders and the knees and all of that. I'm going a lot of chiropractor. I've been seeing the chiropractor now. I'm doing massage, all that stuff, because a little beat up. So I think I'll stick with the talking for now. I will tell you real quick. There was time, I've never actually shared this. There was that time, spring of 24, where I still hadn't gotten going yet with what I'm doing now. And I almost went back to play. I've never even talked about this. I went in, I talked with Trout, and I had brought up to him, I was like, hey, is this something that you guys would be open to? And they're like, yeah, of course, we'd have you back if you wanted to. It's completely up to you. And I thought about it for a while. I was just so beat up, not only from the concussions and just what I went through with that, but like I said, I still have a torn labrum in my right shoulder. I fixed my left one. I was just like, you know what? At that point, the offensive line was really solidified, and I was kind of like, I like what I'm doing. So I just ended up not doing it, and thankfully they continued to obviously pay for my schooling and all that. So forever grateful for that. But yeah, I've never talked about that. I was contemplating actually going back to playing for a little bit, mainly because I was like, I want to make money. This NIL stuff looks really good.
Wow. Landon, do you think offensive linemen, we often hear that offensive linemen are cerebral, okay? Do you think that maybe offensive linemen are pretty well suited to this? I can think of a lot of offensive linemen who have done it or are doing it. Do you think there's something to that?
I do. I think we understand. Listen, we understand that we are not normally in the spotlight, and we understand that we're kind of these selfless individuals that can kind of just come together. We have to be a unit. We have to work well together. So I think anytime you're kind of on a podcast like this, you're used to working with guys, talking with guys, and I think overall we are just like the most friendly. We're always a helping hand, because you got to pick up the quarterback when they get sacked. You got to take the running back into the end zone and then pick them up, Olu Fashanu style. It's a lot of just teamwork and not being the star of the show. So you kind of get a feel for, just kind of get in the media realm. And I think a lot of them, we got some smart dudes. I mean, you see what Nick Dawkins is doing in the community. I think overall, I want to say offensive line, when I was at Penn State, we were always the highest GPA position group outside of the quarterbacks, just because they're so small and they're obviously very smart. But as far as like big groups, offensive line was always the highest GPA. So I think we've seen guys around here, Ross Tucker, obviously Jason Kelsey's killing it. So I don't know. I'm all for offensive linemen in the media.
Landon, can you tell me this? I know this is going to be in your wheelhouse, but back up the sentiment that the best part of this Penn State football team is its offensive line. How would you support that?
Yeah, I think where we sit right now, Penn State, I went back and looked, shout out, we talked to Chris Buchanani about this. We have really never had all guys on one team, all 5 starting offensive linemen eventually get drafted to the NFL. I even looked back 1994. There was one, I believe it was either the center or the right guard. One of the guys did not get drafted. So that has never happened. I think there is a very real possibility that this year that happens. I think basically no brainer, all of them. I think the only question would be if Nick Dawkins gets drafted after this year. But I think absolutely Drew Shelton, Vanga Ioane, whoever starts at right guard, whether that's Cooper Cousins or Anthony Donko, I think they will both be drafted eventually. And Nolan Rucci is also going to be drafted. So that really has never happened. Where we have come from, those 2010s years, where, I mean, the offensive line was the laughing stock. Shout out, it was a tough time when Matt Limegrover was here. We were not doing well. And the way that Philip Trautwein has turned this whole thing around, not only are these guys just really good on the field, but I think the reason why this has happened and there's this cohesiveness in the offensive line. I mean, talking to the guys, they all go out to eat together. We have every position group has a strength coach. So ours is Coach Earls. The guys will go and watch his kids' flag football games. They all go together to do, stretching, tubs. Coach Trout in the summer on Mondays blocks off 5 tee times at the local golf course, and all the offensive linemen go out and golf together. So going over to Trout's house for barbecue. I mean, all of it. And like I said, it's really a credit to Coach Trautwein, but they are just the heart and soul of this team. If you saw the picture that Penn State football put out, they all decided to wear those jean overalls. I mean, it's constant. It's just like the alignment between those guys. You understand why they're going to be on it, and everybody's going to know what their job is. And I'll share with this, too, Coach Trautwein, he makes you know every single position. So when you go in and you have to do your test each week and you have to get ready for the game, not only if I'm Vanga Ioane, I'm at left guard, not only do I got to know what I'm doing at left guard, but I got to know what the left tackle, the center, the right guard, and the right tackle are doing. I got to write down the responsibility on every play versus every single look that this defense might give us. So that's a look into the preparation that Philip Trautwein really makes you go through, and it makes you almost over-prepared.
A couple things. One is just a little footnote, a little newsy, something you just said there. Is Donko a guard for sure now? That's one thing. But the other thing is, I know you're a film study guy and film breakdown guy. The only position ranking of the millions that we see this time of year for Penn State's offensive line that was not one of the top 3 or so in the country was Pro Football Focus, which is very film story study oriented. And I just wonder if I'm sure you don't agree with their assessment, but can you see where they're coming from? Do you see anything in the film that, well, maybe that's what they saw?
Yeah, so first off with Donko, I think where we sit right now, I think Nolan Rucci played so well last year in the playoffs, and also going into his final year. Nolan Rucci was my class 2021. We did not get a COVID year. So the last of the COVID years are the 2020 guys using at this year. So it's his last year. I think he's just played well enough to be that right tackle. Now, that's not to say that I think Anthony Donko, I mean, he's going to get some reps at right tackle, but I think overall for a starting position, and Coach Trout, I talked to him, and he's said it in the media. He's mentioned Donko getting guard reps, so that's why I feel even a little bit more comfortable about this. But I just did a film breakdown. I actually looked at Anthony Donko's 2023 guard tape, because when Anthony Donko came here, he was actually playing left guard behind me, and then ended the season playing right tackle when Caden Wallace did not finish the Peach Bowl because he only played half of it and then headed off to the NFL. So it's somewhere that Anthony Donko has played. Now, I think everybody's super excited about Cooper Cousins, and rightfully so. I mean, he has been really talked up by the coaches, and he deserves that. He is, really just beyond his years and his understanding of the game. Coach Trout compared him to the work ethic of the Pouncey twins. So it's a hard decision to make, and I think it's going to happen all the way throughout camp, because that's how it worked when Hunter Norzad and I went at it. It was every day. It was like if someone had an off day, well, the other guy got a little more reps. And it's like Trout was just pushing that competition. And I think competition always brings the best out in everybody. But, Trout's big thing is putting the best 5 out there. And I don't think, as much as Anthony Donko has played tackle, I think he can play either. So I don't think it would be it's not his unnatural position. It's not like it'd be putting Nolan Rucci at guard, who's 6'8", and it just wouldn't look right. So I'm not saying that Anthony Donko's going to be the starter, but I do think there is a battle truly at right guard for who's going to play there, Cooper Cousins or Anthony Donko. But I think all three of those guys, you'll see them kind of mix match throughout that right side of the offensive line. Now, as far as PFF, look, to give you a breakdown of how PFF works, they hire people that have nothing to do with Penn State or anybody, any game that they're grading. And they put them through a little bit of a process where they give them, 5 games, and they got to go through and grade these 5 games. And PFF has already graded every single piece of these games. And they basically scale you, and you have to hit a certain amount of correct answers. For example, you grade everything from, each player, did they do their job? What type of play was it? All of that type of thing. So, I think from time to time, as much as they do a vetting process, they don't understand what is trying to be run. So they might say this person gets a bad grade for this play, but they don't really know what they were trying to do there. Now, obviously, there is the decisive, someone gets beat, they get beat. So there is that. But I mean, it's just hard for me. I'm going to be a little biased. These are all some of my best friends. But it's just hard for me for, like I said, an offensive line that I am almost certain probably all 5 guys are going to the NFL, and the 6th guy, I think it's got to be a top 3, top 5 offensive line in college football.
Mike went right to talking shop. I wanted to pick your brain about this golf game, but I'll continue the theme, talking the important stuff. A lot of the hype around Penn State is not only Drew Aller coming back, but it's the 2-headed monster at running back with Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. You were offensive player of the game at their breakout game, what I consider their breakout game, down in Auburn. They're 2 contrasting styles. Does that affect you guys up front? And we know, as we mentioned here already, offensive linemen are very cerebral. Does that factor into how they're going to read a defense and how you're going to block a certain defensive attack to their type of style?
No, it's not really something like we would talk about on the offensive line. Now, I mean, what I will say, and that I did understand more than anything, was that I knew when I was playing that Nick loved to bounce it. So we might be running inside zone. And especially that freshman year, if you think back to that Ohio run, I believe he did it against Auburn too. There's a couple times where we were running inside zone, which means going right behind the center's butt, and Nick just took off to the right or the left and just bounced it outside. So, I mean, there was a little bit of that understanding there. For me, Katron Allen's vision was something that we would sit and film and we'd go, ooh, and it's like one of those, like, how did he see that before it happened? I've compared him at times to Le'Veon Bell. If you had all watched the Steelers in the mid-2010s, that hesitation, that ability to see it before it happens, I really like what I see from Katron Allen there. So from a standpoint of knowing who was in, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to block this combo block differently, but it was just a kind of understanding of knowing the runner. Also, let's say if it's a pin and pull, which is guys are blocking down and offensive linemen are pulling out and we're getting out in space. I might have a little bit more time if Katron Allen is running versus Nick. I do remember in the Auburn game, I guess I won't curse. I don't think I'm allowed to, but Katron Allen got out. I got in Katron Allen's way. I did not get out of the way fast enough. He got tackled and he said, "Move." And I was like, my bad, fat man. I'm sorry. So I remember getting barked at by Katron for not moving fast enough. But overall, it was just more of an understanding of kind of what that guy liked to do. And it just gave you an idea of, hey, maybe this might happen.
Is one of those runs that everybody was like, ooh, in the film room, the goal line run against Auburn, where he basically tap dance three holes down? Because that's my favorite run of his up until last year in the postseason, where he was just running different.
I know exactly which play you're talking about. That is definitely one of them. I mean, it was fun to watch those guys be that good as freshmen. It really was. But you make a good point, though. Katron Allen, if he picks up where he left off, I don't like to pit the two against each other because they're best friends and they are both completely different. But I mean, some people are even saying that, I think overall everybody just kind of said Nick Singleton is the better running back. Katron Allen is playing like how he left off against Notre Dame and Oregon and all those games. I don't know, man. I almost say Katron might even be the more talented runner.
Okay, interesting.
Landon, got a couple quick questions for you here. One rapid fire after another. Okay, what's more grueling, football or water polo?
I got to go with water polo. Treading water. If there's no touching the ground, 15 feet. You're out there for 45 minutes. I'll take water polo on that one. As long as it's not 100-degree humidity camp day, maybe football could win that then.
Okay, who's your best debut receiver? Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson.
I'll go Trevor Pena. I think he is going to be out of the slot. I think he kind of takes over that role as a bit of Drew Allar's safety blanket that Tyler Warren left behind.
All right. Is it Penn State come December is the one standing at the top? Penn State, Ohio State, or Oregon, and why?
I'll go Penn State. I'm rocking with the guys. I think Ohio State is first year where we have the Heisman level quarterback, we have the elite offensive line, we have the elite run game. I think we have the better coaching staff. I think Ohio State's incredibly thin at a couple positions. Defensive line, news just broke this morning. One of their defensive tackles left practice with a kind of a ugly leg injury. It was kind of their only defensive tackle left. I mean, there's positions where they're thin there. And then same thing with Oregon. Oregon's coming in, lost a ton of that talent, kind of had to overhaul their offensive line. And then you bring in Dante Moore, who did sit behind Dylan Gabriel last year, started as a freshman at UCLA, said, hey, I'm going to take a year, learn from Dylan Gabriel. But we don't really know what we're getting from Dante Moore. So a lot of question marks around Ohio State and Oregon. Penn State has proven we have the depth, we have the talent, we have the coaching staff. It's really no excuse for it not to be Penn State this year.
If I could follow up real quick, what is one, the team and the players in a different view than we do, and of course the fans. So what's one thing that you think is a Penn State strength or an advantage or something you think that maybe people are missing, that people don't know enough about, or people are glossing over? Is there something that kind of hits you for this team this season that maybe isn't getting enough talk as to why they could be?
Yeah, I think a big piece after, and people are somewhat talking about it, but I'd go with the tight ends. I think because Tyler Warren was so good, there has been a lot of talk about the running backs, about what are the wide receivers going to do? Can Drew Aller finally cross that mark to truly being elite? And they've kind of been forgotten about. Khalil Dinkins, I think, is going to play a huge role in this offense, and it was not talked about enough last year, the blocking he did. And really, I think I compare it to the 2022 tight. You want to talk about the Auburn game? Brenton Strange was rolling dudes in the run game. That's what I think Khalil Dinkins takes over Brenton Strange's role. I think, the Theo Johnson, I think that's Luke Reynolds. I think Andrew Rappelier doesn't have a college catch yet because obviously got injured last year right after West Virginia. But I think he can even be a little bit of that a younger Tyler Warren role where he's a really good blocker, but he also can get dirty in the receiving game. So that's kind of where I compare it. I think they are going to be really good. Didn't even bring up freshman Andrew Olish, who's basically kind of a wide receiver type guy, but that's a 5-star. Anytime you're stashing 5 stars, you're in a great place. But what I think the biggest thing that allows us to do with these wide receivers, Penn State has gotten 5-6 wide receivers in the transfer portal era. We've hit on one of them, Mitchell Tinsley. None of the other ones have been true hits at all. So to think that all 3 are going to be hits is probably wishful thinking. So what that tells me is, we got to rely on the run game and some good tight ends. And the good part about having 3 tight ends is you can get into 12 personnel. 12 personnel is 1 running back, 2 tight ends. Because if you only have 2 tight ends, it's a lot harder to run 2 tight end sets because you can only do it so much because guys got to get breathers and then you got to go, let's go 1 tight end. But if you got 3 guys that are interchangeable, well, you can run a lot of 2 tight end sets. And I know that's a world that we love to live in. So, imagine you got Andrew Rappelier out there as a vicious blocker. You got Khalil Dinkins, and then you got the 5 starters up front, and you want to just run the ball on, say, a vulnerable Ohio State defense that was already planning on running a 3-4 because, like I said, their defensive line is not what it used to be. Larry Johnson, I don't know. I guess he's lacking a little bit over there in Columbus. And so they're saying we're going to rely on our linebackers a little bit more. And like I just said, we don't know. We haven't really heard, but one of their defensive tackles just went down in practice. It's going to be a thinner group. Do we go out and do we become the Michigan of 2022, 2023, where you just pound the rock? I mean, there is that ability out there. And then it's nice when you also have Drew Aller. So I think there has not been enough talk about what the tight ends bring to this offense from a versatility standpoint, from just a scheme standpoint. And also, I think Luke Reynolds can, be a little bit of what Tyler Warren was. No one can beat Tyler Warren, but maybe there's even a thought of, hey, Luke Reynolds, we saw what he did with that fake punt against Minnesota. We want to throw him back there at Wildcat. And I think that's something hasn't been talked about either, is who's going to take over that Wildcat role. I don't think Andy Kotelnicki's just going to trash that one, especially near the goal line. We really like that. And you kind of like a bigger body. So could that be Luke Reynolds? So there's so much versatility coming out of this tight end room. That's, I think, something that not enough people have been talking about.
Landon, you brought up the injury that Ohio State just had in camp, and we'll wait to see how that plays out during the year. Not naming Drew Aller, what is the one position, one player Penn State cannot lose that then has people questioning the preseason hype of Penn State and, would put in doubt what this team could possibly do at the end of the year?
Oh, man. I want to just give you one, but there's truly three that come to mind. If we lose any of these three, I think we're in a tough place. Zakee Wheatley, Dani Dennis Sutton, or Zane Durant. If any of those go down, we're in big trouble. Dani Dennis Sutton goes down, we're already hurting. We don't even really know what we're getting out of Zariah Fisher because he's had 2 season-ending injuries. And then behind that, it is a lot of unproven at defensive end. So if Dani goes down, Zariah is the end one, and then we have to look to Jalen Harvey or like I said, just no people that we don't even know the name of, really, that the fans don't know the name of. Same thing with Zane Durant. Zane Durant goes down. Alonzo Ford, already kind of shaky as well, coming off of a knee injury. We don't know how well he is going to come back. And then behind that, I mean, there are some guys like Xavier Gilliam. We did get we got a transfer from Michigan, Wafel, but there's a lot of question marks there. And then, like I said, at safety was Zakee Wheatley. He's going to be that guy on the back end. If we lost him, it would be kind of fully on Dejon Lane and then King Mack, and I would not feel good about that. So I think that's the biggest thing. I list those 3 guys, and this is any year, but Penn State cannot get injured, specifically on defense. We are just really thin in a lot of different areas on defense. We have to avoid that.
Landon, I'm going to ask you a really unfair one right now. Based on something you said a couple minutes ago, you said in a very straightforward way, Penn State has a better coaching staff than Ohio State. And I'm thinking about something that I heard Paul Feinbaum say the other day, though. So is James Franklin a better coach than Ryan Day?
I mean, I don't think right now you can say he is, just because Ryan Day just won a national championship. I think that'd be unfair to Ryan Day. And anybody that watches my stuff, I'm incredibly fair. I'm going to be a little bit of a homer, but I'm also going to tell you what needs to be heard. I would say that's the one place where Ohio State has us, and there might be a couple other position groups, but I think we have the best coordinator combo. I obviously just took their defensive coordinator. I think there's a lot of questions about Matt Patricia, Ohio State's new defensive coordinator, of what is that going to look like. He loves a multiple defense where they're doing a ton of different creative stuff and moving guys all around. How is Ohio State going to adjust to that with probably one of the least talented defense they've had in a couple years? I mean, still Caleb Downs is, I think, the best player in college football. But, looking at like that, and then you look, we got Phil Troutwine, I think the best offensive line coach. A little biased there, but you've seen what he's done. Poindexter. Dan Connor's coming on really. Deion Barnes, completely underrated from a development standpoint. Of Abdul Carter, people were screaming. Everybody seems to forget this. They were saying, Abdul Carter, back the linebacker. He's not a good D-end. And he really wasn't. I watched it. He didn't understand how to rush the passer. And so quickly, it was like this dude became a pass rush technician because of Deion Barnes really helped him get there. And not only put that aside, he was a top 3 pick in the NFL. He had that talent. But Keziah Izzard came on the scene because of Deion Barnes after Alonzo Ford went down. When Abdul Carter went down against Boise State, Amin Vanover could have been the defensive MVP if Zakee Wheatley didn't have that type of game that he had. So saying all to say, I'll say, yeah, I think Ryan Day still has James Franklin, and he also has beat him every single time they face each other. So it would be wrong to say James Franklin has Ryan Day. But I just think all around, you look at the coaching staff, Penn State's in a lot better place than Ohio State.
Following up on that, and this was emailed into the show that they wanted me to ask you, why is Drew Aller and James Franklin going to shed the big game stigma that has stuck with them, James Franklin for longer than Drew Allen? I rephrased that question nicer than what was written in.
I'm sure you did. Yeah. I mean, look, I remember watching, the whole time I was a recruit, my, late 2010s, I watched all those Ohio State games. And really for me, the answer is, and even playing in those games in 21 and 22, just being around and watching what happened, it felt like Ohio State, number one, they always had the quarterback. They were always better at quarterback. I mean, you think back, when was the last time they had a bad quarterback? And it's been a long time. And I'm not saying that Julian Sayin is going to be a bad quarterback. I think whoever they put out there is going to be good because they're Ohio State. But, outside of, I kind of felt like that last year or 2 years ago with Kyle McCord. It was kind of like, all right, it's our year, and we still didn't get it done. But this is the first time where I feel like we are more talented. And if you go back and look, the recruiting rankings, you can tell why Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan they feel like they're more talented because we're in the teens in recruiting, and they're finishing top 5 every year. So it's no surprise that when we go into the game and you look and it's like, oh, they had a better class, way better class 3 years ago. And those are all the guys that are impacting the game today. Well, yeah, they have more talent because they recruited better. So I think this is the first time where it's like, because of just how it kind of all aligned, all that 2022 class for Penn State that was about top 5 on some recruiting rankings, this is their final year. And it's all kind of coming together where, like I said, we have that coaching staff. But as I said, we have the Heisman quarterback candidate. We have the best rushing duo in college football. Don't let a Notre Dame fan listen to this; they'll tell you otherwise. We have the best offensive line. So that's kind of where I lean. That's why we finally win the big game, is because we are actually the more talented team. I did a video on my channel, though. I talked about it. I said, look, in the James Franklin era here at Penn State, we have only won 3 games where we are the underdog. It was 2 of them were in 2016. So it was Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. And it was obviously Ohio State. And then the other one was 2014. It was the Pinstripe Bowl. So that was a whole different time in Penn State's sphere. So it hasn't happened in almost 10 years. We do not win games that we are not supposed to. Now, to credit James Franklin, he does win almost every single game. I think outside of that Illinois, don't even need to talk about that. It was one of the worst times ever on that sideline. Outside of the 9 overtime Illinois loss, in recent memory, he has not lost a game that he was supposed to win. But that's been the biggest problem, is getting over that hump. And we remember that speech in 2018 after Ohio State of, we are great, but we're not elite, and we're still there. But now 2025 is here. It seems like this is the year. We do say it almost every single year, but it really feels like that this year. Like, it's now or never. I think if there is some type of, I am fully in a natty or bust mode. I think that's been a question for some people. If we go and lose, obviously that'd be a heartbreaker. I think that would be whatever. If you're as long as you're in the game. But if we lose in the semifinals or even don't go as far as we did last year, it's an utter disappointment.
I'm with you. As soon as the Jim Knowles hire was official, I said it's natty or bust, and the window is 3 years. I won't say a complete failure year 1. If it doesn't happen within 3 years, I'm on a complete failure. And I know dynamics change with changing quarterbacks, but that is my timeline looking at it, because they're all in at this moment.
I will say they're all in, but you look at 2026, we do have a very favorable schedule, not to get ahead of ourselves. We don't play Oregon or Ohio State. Michigan and USC are the toughest games. But, you look at what's going to happen. Not only do we lose Adler, but we're losing the running backs. We're losing a lot of our defensive line. We're going to lose, Zaki. We're going to lose a huge chunk of this team. And you start to look around, and nothing's guaranteed. But Kotelnicki's probably gone. He was this close to taking that West Virginia job. He wants to be a head coach. I think you start looking around, and there's a lot of position coaches that I listed off that I think are some of the best position coaches in college football. And they're going to start looking around for OC and DC jobs, especially if we do really well this year. So that's what makes me even more say, hey, we might take a little bit of a step down next year. It makes it even more so that this is the year.
Landon, what sort of specifically do you think Knowles is going to bring? What X and O stuff, what scheme stuff, what people are going to be able to see and understand that he's going to bring to it?
Yeah, I think the most noticeable thing you'll see from a fan standpoint is the exotic blitzes. And that's something he loved to do at Ohio State. Really towards the end, I think a lot of people thought of Jack Sawyer and JTT, those 2 defensive ends for Ohio State, as being, very good. I don't think they were that talented, but Jim Knowles brought some great blitzes that freed them up and gave them one-on-one opportunities. So if you're getting to a point where if you're Jim Knowles and say, hey, I'm going to scheme up a really nice blitz on the left side that might get home, but at worst, I leave Denai Dennis Sutton one-on-one with the offensive tackle. Right. Things like that. How can he scheme his defense to get the best situations possible, the best matchups possible? I think you'll see things like Zakee Wheatley playing down in the box. I think Jim Knowles is going to have a really fun time with Zakee and say, hey, how can I get him as close to the action as possible? Because we all know this guy is a turnover machine. I mean, I've been playing Zakee since I was 14 years old, and even back then, he was getting turnovers. So how can he kind of play around with that? I think this is the first year, really, since we've had Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King, where it was like, yo, we got two really good cornerbacks. I mean, you even look out there. I mean, we know what we have in A.J. Harris. What a great transfer portal pickup. I think by the end of it, if he has the season we expect, he could be up there in a conversation with being the best transfer portal pickup ever. I think it would be between him and Chop Robinson. So, you have that there. You have a Davian Collins, who I'm talking to NFL scouts, and I'm hearing that he's running high 4.2s, and it's a wow. Elliott Washington is cornerback kind of 3, but Franklin came out and said that they're competing for cornerback number 2, Davian Collins and Elliott Washington. So it's the first time you're really good. You're solid at DB across the board. I think there is a little bit of question of kind of that strong safety of King Mack, Dejon Lane. And then you also kind of look at, hey, what are we going to do at that nickel cornerback? Because we all know we're running that 4-2-5 defense. Franklin said, yeah, we're LBU, but we're taking away one of the linebackers because it's not our strength this year. So that is the defense that Jim Knowles does love as well, is having that fifth DB in the game. And so you look at that. Who is that going to be? I think it's going to be a mixture of King Mack or Zion Tracy. We saw Zion Tracy with that pick 6 against Ohio State last year. And the other piece of it too is Jalen Reed played a lot of that position. And I think this is something that flew under the radar. Jalen Reed was borderline elite at rushing the passer. I mean, was really good. And it was something he took pride in. He would after practice, he would always work his moves, his pass rush moves as a safety. And so can we replicate that? Can Jim Knowles find a way to get, Zion Tracy, get him home off of the edge? I mean, if you think back, Johnny Dixon at a time, he led entire college football in sacks for cornerbacks. So can scheme up those cornerback blitzes? And so, I mean, there's a lot of different questions for Jim Knowles of what he is going to do. Like I said, I think you'll see just exotic would be the word from blitzes, from a coverage standpoint. Now, and when I say that, though, I guess the biggest question that would be asked is, well, exotic, and a lot of these guys didn't even get spring ball. I mean, and Jim Knowles talked about this. Zane Durant, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zion Tracy, King Mack. There was even more guys that really didn't play in spring ball. And so you didn't get any live reps in Jim Knowles' defense, and we're talking exotic? Well, that doesn't sound very good, because not a lot of reps in exotic defense normally equals confusion. So, and we've heard it from the Ohio State fan base. They love saying that it takes 2 to 3 years to implement this guy's defense. I don't necessarily believe that to be true, but it is complex. So camp is going to be big. I think this is one of the most it's partially because of how big this year is for Penn State, but I mean, this camp is going to be huge for Penn State, not only position battles, but just getting comfortable in this new defense.
Landon, do you have a quick Drew Aller anecdote or story that might give a little insight into maybe him being able, like what kind of player he truly can be his senior year? Maybe him he has so much focus on so-called taking the next step and being that elite quarterback. Is there something maybe that you kind of behind the scenes kind of could relate to us that might shed a little more light on maybe him as a person and his development, anything like that?
Yeah. No, I mean, so Drew came in, and obviously he was a young guy, and he was obviously very quiet. And one thing I do remember, I'll share this story with you. We were at Purdue, and everybody remembers week 1 when Sean got hurt against Purdue for a little bit. And Drew came in, and I remember I was in there at left guard, and I remember I think we were working silent count, even though we didn't really need it. I had looked back at Drew, and it was his first snap, and I swear to God, he winked at me. And then he threw that laser. If you remember, it was to Tyler Warren. They ran cover 2, and he threw that corner, and he dropped it. It hit Tyler right in the hands. And that always stuck with me about Drew. Now, I think each year he has been really trying to progress. I mean, he gave that quote, talked about Portman earlier, gave that quote to Portman, trying to be the I think he said trying to be the thermostat and not the thermometer, and just, controlling and, registering that heat. And I think he's done better at that. Obviously everybody's talking about the Notre Dame game. I understand that. Yes, it probably was Drew Aller's worst game of his career. Can we see more of Drew Aller being that emotional leader? And, you say, can I relate kind of my own thing? Well, here's what I'll relate. Sean Clifford was one of the greatest leaders I've ever been around. And that was because Sean Clifford was an unbelievable emotional leader. I mean, that guy would be borderline screaming, crying, just letting you feel everything that he was thinking. And I think because he was the quarterback, that meant so much to us. So, I mean, that's why that 2023 season and that Rose Bowl year went, obviously dropped to Ohio State and Michigan, kind of as we always do. But it was still special. Jair Brown, PJ Mustipher, we had a special leadership, and it started with Sean Clifford. Can it start with Drew Aller this year? That would be my biggest question. We know Nick Dawkins is going to bring it. Dom DeLuca is going to be one of the defensive captains. Zakee Wheatley, those guys are going to say what needs to be said. Denai is very vocal. But can it come from Drew Aller? Can Drew Aller be the guy to bring everybody in and kind of give everybody that common sense of, hey, we got this, that swagger? And I think it's hard sometimes because, like I said, that's not everybody. I don't necessarily think, like I said, Drew is not Sean from a standpoint. He's not going to be crying, screaming before the game, saying, I want to die for this. But, can you bring a little bit more out of that West Virginia out where you truck someone and got up and got in his face and started talking trash? Can you get that out of Drew Aller this year? And if you do, I think you are a senior-laden team. And if you have him at the helm, I feel really good about where we're at. So, I mean, that'd be my biggest thing for Drew Aller. Can he take that next step as an emotional leader?
Landon, last one, real quick. You have Penn State at the top of the mountain in the Big Ten. Big Ten's one of the top two conferences. Who comes out of another conference to play Penn State in a national championship game for you?
I would love to see Clemson. I'd love to face Clemson. I think it would be some great storylines. I think Dabo versus Franklin would be really cool. I think you got Cade Klubnik versus Drew Aller would be a conversation. They're elite at wide receiver this year. They as well, kind of similar to us, have an elite defensive tackle and elite defensive end. So I think that would be a good battle. Also a veteran Clemson offensive line, a couple of my good friends from the Maryland area. I think that would be something really, it would be cool to see them. And I think this is another reason why this is Penn State's year. If you want that answer too, is because you look around college football, there is not a juggernaut right now. As so many years pass, you come in and you say, Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia, my God, how are they going to be stopped this year? You look around and you don't see that. So much quarterback overhaul around, and partially of that is the transfer portal, but also a lot of guys went to the NFL. There's head coaching changes, all that stuff. You look around and there's not that one team that you just say, how they're unbeatable. How do you do that? And so I think that is why it could be Penn State's year this year.
Media conglomerate in his own right, Landon Tengwall of Behind the Wall. Landon, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to having you on in the future, especially during this season as Penn State makes run. Thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Great stuff, Landon. Appreciate
it.
Awesome stuff from Landon Tengwall. Great guest. So young in the media field, just basically right out of college as a player, and very insightful. So really want to give him a shout out and thank him a lot for coming on the program. Guys, we pick it up right there. He has Penn State playing Clemson in the national championship, Penn State winning the Big Ten. I think Penn State is going to be preseason number 1 in the AP poll. Maybe I'm misjudging the rest of the nation. How do you guys kind of see this? And I'm putting a lot of stock in what came out of Big Ten Media Day with Penn State being picked to win the Big Ten. So where do you see Penn State preseason rankings?
Go ahead.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, I'm thinking that it's not going to be number 1. I'm thinking we're focused on Big Ten Media Days and all this extra love Penn State's getting, which is all true. But I'm thinking more like anywhere from 2 to number 4. When it all comes out, when everybody's voting across the country, I still think the national media, while they're talking up Penn State, are going to give the initial preseason edge to, say, Texas, or maybe even Clemson, Alabama up there, somebody else. It would not surprise me if Penn State is 2 or 3, I would be a little bit, not stunned, but I would be a little surprised if they were actually number one.
Yeah, Andrew and I were talking before we went on the air here, and I said my guess would be that they'll be number 2 behind Texas. I'm not as high on Clemson as a lot of other people are. And I also think that in the SEC, we're so used to Georgia, Alabama, and I think they're perceived as being a little bit off their stride right now. Obviously, and then the other thing is Texas, but people are unbelievably high on Arch Manning. That's really the thing, and we just haven't seen him play very much. But my guess would be Penn State 2 and Texas 1, and then maybe the Irish 3. I think the Irish are going to be top 5.
I think they might be a little just the question at quarterback. I think people are putting them down going to put them down a little bit, almost wait and see. And I think that's why Ohio State, even though Landon really brought up a lot of really good points as to why they could take a slight step back, I just think that national media are not going to put Ohio State above Penn State because of quarterback. Yeah. You know, I think while people love to question Drew Aller, in the end, they're going to give Penn State the boost or the benefit of the doubt because of Drew Aller, because he's a third-year starter.
You guys all make points, and I think politics, geography politics, that have always existed in college football, and Penn State fans know this very well when it comes to voters, that now with the Big Ten spanning coast to coast, I think with the USA Today vote, the Cleveland.com vote, with Penn State winning the Big Ten, that'll put it on more voters' minds. Texas is a former Big 12 member. They did not leave with a parade. There are voters in the Big 12. Who are they going to turn to? I think they would turn to a Penn State. Clemson, ACC voters, I believe, are going to draw them. And I think the SEC will be a little bit fractured. That's why I think Penn State edges out a Texas as a number 1 team. But then again, maybe I'm just reading way too much into how people are going to vote, and, you know, politics won't come into it. But that's why I think a lot of Big 12 voters will not vote for a Texas, even that they feel they're the best team out of. They don't want to give Texas, you know, horns down. They don't want to give them the satisfaction because of how acrimonious that departure was. But maybe it's in the past.
That's not there. You made a pretty good case there, big guy. There is some regional element to this, to the voting. It always has been, and so it's certainly possible. But my guess would be Texas 1, Penn State 2, maybe Notre Dame 3, maybe Clemson 4. People are high on Clemson. Yeah.
And if you're a fan, do you want Penn State number 1? Do you like that they're getting this much publicity? Because you know what? If you go back through the preseason rankings, Penn State has been to this level twice in the Big Ten era. Okay, 1997, 1999. Both years did not end. Not only did they not end as the preseason ranking would have suggested, they did not end well at all. And I'm only saying it because sometimes your view at the beginning, just in this sport, it just doesn't end up that way, right? I mean, I don't know how much of it is psychological too at times, but you know what I'm saying.
I think as a Penn State fan, I think you want it. I think you want it for a lot more reasons than even just trying to live up to the hype and speculations. And Mike, by the way, what you say, I could buy that case that you make. I felt like Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men. I'm making an argument like Lieutenant Cappy. I was making an argument. And Frank, you're a genius, because if you look at my computer screen that you guys can see just off to my left, I have all the high rankings in the AP preseason poll for Penn State. And 1999, they were number 1 in Sports Illustrated. You mentioned 1997, that ended like the Hindenburg. 1999 kind of ended like the Hindenburg as well. But you have to go all the way back to 1978 and 1969 to find Penn State being in the top 3, and they were number 3 both of those years. And 78, they did come for a long portion of the season up to number 1 during the season. But for the most part, 1994, they were preseason.
Well, I know they were 9th in the coaches poll preseason.
Yeah, they snuck a little bit. They snuck up people that year. At the end of 93, they were playing really well, and a great bowl game, great performance by Kerry Collins in the bowl game. So it was coming, and they had an unbelievably elite recruiting class at that whole group, including Collins and Brady, et cetera. But you guys know that. But
Number 4 in 1995, and in 2017 they started number 6, and it rose all the way up to number 2, which would be Penn State's highest ranking to date.
If they have the year they had, if they have this year the kind of season they had in 97 and 99, we're going to be having a much different conversation about James Franklin.
Well,
much different.
Landon brings up a really good point in that, a couple, and this is football, but a few injuries. It's really, if you look at that, for example, that 94 team, at least on offense, basically had no significant injuries that I remember, at least ones that made a difference, right?
That's true.
And that's part of the secret of their success. So, you got to be able to you're going to get injuries, but can you avoid having the wrong players injured? Because you can make an argument that the season would have been a little different if KJ Winston might not have been lost in week 2, because their defense might have had a whole different look in the biggest games, but you can't control it. So can you avoid the injuries that he mentioned, right? Those types of injuries. Can you avoid that? And that's never, we just don't know, and if you can't avoid it, like Ohio State couldn't last year, how do you rebound, react, recover, reload from it? They were amazing in the end at doing that. I think Penn State actually was a little bit in that regard on the lines last year too. For the first time that I remember, when they got a couple of tough injuries in November, they didn't kind of fold in those positions, right? Nolan Rucci stepped up and got better in the postseason. Their offensive line got better. Katron Allen came back from a nagging injury and got better in the postseason. So maybe things are turning.
Two things. Number one, I think they can absorb some injuries maybe a little better than a lot of other teams in the country, particularly on that offensive line, which one of the reasons why the offensive line is so important is you have to have 5 of them. That's the rules of football. You have to have 5 of them all on every offensive snap. And that, I think they're in good shape in that way. And the other thing is when you asked Landon, who are the guys that they can least afford to be without, not counting Aller? The first guy I thought of was Zane Durant, and the second guy I thought of was Denai Dennis Sutton, which is, I didn't think of Wheatley really, but they do have some holes on defense, and they do have some specific guys, and those ones that were mentioned, it would be tough to go without them.
I think the comparisons with this topic, what we're talking about regarding injuries, translate so well to 1994. Because, Frank, as you brought it up, 1994 didn't have a significant injury on offense. But on defense, they were pretty decimated at times. They were. So that people, when they think about 1994, they just think, well, the offense was great. The offense was great. It kind of loses its luster just by saying the offense was great, because they had to be exceptionally great late in the year as defensive guys in the secondary and up front. They were dropping. And that was a big thing that happened in 1999. The injuries just towards the end of the year, the team had the crap kicked out of them. Plus losing to Minnesota, how much was there? But, LeVar Arrington and the defense, they didn't have the same guys that started the year against Michigan State. LeVar didn't even play against Michigan State to end of the year, which is a big reason why the season ended with a thud, was due to injuries. But the comparisons to 1994, I couldn't think of the word right there, go much deeper than just the offensive line is good and the offense is gonna carry the team, because there are similarities across the board, I think, for this team.
Yeah, this team, I think this defense can be better than that one and can be more talented, but it has some depth issues like that one did. And that defense was not bad, but they're all, it's like they had the opportunity. They formed an elite unit on offense and they took advantage of it, right? Because they pounded teams into submission that it didn't matter usually that their defense wasn't the way they wanted it to be or could be or expected it to be. And to me, can they take advantage of all of these positive, these riches, so to speak, on offense? Can they be elite? I mean, if they can, I think, they can overcome some of that. And they got such a good coordinator situation that we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, I guess, until the season gets going and we start questioning it. But to me, they haven't had a combination like that since I don't know when. At least the way it looks like on paper, right?
Another thing that Landon said that I've been thinking about, or he kind of alluded to, is they might be quite similar to Michigan in 22 and 23 when we're talking about Khalil Dinkins, where they kind of could outnumber people on the line of scrimmage and just push them around. That's how Harbaugh liked to play. And with that sixth blocker there, who's an elite blocker, who we all think Dinkins is,
you're right.
Yeah.
All this love that Khalil Dinkins is getting, that it's curious to me because it's not like I don't believe it, but he doesn't even to me look like a dominating blocker. He looks more still like he could be, you split him out wide and throw him the football type of guy.
He's not a 270-pound guy. That's true.
But but I'm not going to say I don't agree with what they're saying. If they're saying it, it must be true. And to me, that's like a secret sauce. That's a secret ingredient that people will not see, is that type of blocking, because, you go back again to 94. What was the key on that offensive line, that offense? To me, it was Kyle Brady and his otherworldly blocking as a tight end that made all the difference, that nobody, unless you're really tuned into it, really kind of could understand, right? Because people are not watching the tight end block, but he was so good at it. And if Khalil Dinkins can be that good and help do what you said, Mike, then all of a sudden, how do you stop it? And that's maybe what they got the chance to do.
Imagine the love Khalil Dinkins would get if Drew Aller threw him the ball when he was wide open on some of those where the ball went to Warren. I wanted to, everybody knows, or you guys know, I wanted to fly a plane over Beaver Stadium that said, throw the ball to Dinkins. Poor dude's running down the middle of the field, not a soul around him, doesn't get the ball thrown to him.
How does Drew not see him? He's not small.
He's not small. It's just that quarterback thought the play's designed to have somebody there. It's a busted coverage, and it's supposed to go with the throwback, the trick play, right, the misdirection, and boom, that's your first read. It's there. Meanwhile, the busted coverage just pops.
Well, Andrew, we've all seen planes flying over Beaver Stadium trailing messages. So that is something that you can do. That's a possibility that you didn't do that.
So we are not going, based on time, we are not going to dive into Penn State's non-conference schedule because we know there's a lot of thoughts on that as we hit the 54-minute mark. But I will pose this in our last 5 minutes here, guys. Where do you see a landmine on Penn State's schedule? As we're talking preseason rankings, I think they're going to be preseason number 1. Frank, you have them anywhere from 2 to 4. Mike, you have them number 2. Landon Tengwall has them playing in the national championship game. There are landmines out there. I think, and I'm not going on officially, but the possibility for an undefeated regular season is there for me. Where do you see a possible landmine when you look at this schedule and you can't say on the road at Ohio State or the given 2? What is the surprise one?
Well, it's obvious. It's obvious to anybody that looks at the schedule what it is, right?
Okay. I have one in mind. So
I think, honestly, more of one that might be a little bit is Indiana at home because of where it comes, how it follows, where in the season it is, and how good still Indiana could be. And people thinking it's at home, Beaver Stadium, even if they're undefeated. I mean, the more obvious one would be going to Iowa to me because, they've always had a tough time. And you know what? No matter what, you're going on the road to your first road game, right? I mean, is that your first road game?
UCLA.
That doesn't count. The JV teams don't count.
I would think they're going to be so focused on that UCLA thing and traveling 3,000 miles away. I just think, so to me, it'd be Indiana 1, Iowa 2, UCLA 3, I guess.
Villanova, I think, is a tougher opponent than UCLA.
Why would you say such a thing?
Based on our guests last year, who basically admitted, like, kind of nobody really wanted UCLA, and the program was so dysfunctional. And I just don't think UCLA will figure out football for a long, long time.
Well, they've done some things in the portal. They brought in a quarterback. I mean, I'm not trying to sell you on UCLA, but
I'm all about Nico. I'm not really buying what was being said on that whole thing. I think that's that whole transfer thing kind of I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently, so I'm not. I just don't think UCLA is in a good spot.
Okay.
Now, for me, this one's an outlier. If Iowa and Indiana were flipped, I would pick it. I think I was actually in a pretty decent spot for Penn State. Later, when it gets colder out there, the colder it gets and the later in the season, the more rambunctious that stadium becomes. So I think I was in a pretty decent spot on the calendar, maybe not necessarily, right before Ohio State, but I don't think it's going to be a look ahead because of the bye week in between. The game at Michigan State after Ohio State, Indiana, and then it's cold out there. It gets really cold in that Michigan State stadium. And again, I know they have some problems. I just got done saying UCLA's not in a good place. I know Michigan State's not in a good place, but because it's late, because of the system of the playoff, I think that could be, if Penn State walks into that game sleepwalking, not a very good track record out there for James Franklin in Michigan State.
Well, that's a tough spot on the schedule. I think it's more how tough it is for Penn State. I think it's more about what Michigan State becomes than anything else. And also Michigan State coming off an open date that week.
Yep, that's why. That for me is the landmine. Penn State will be fired up to play Rutgers. They will be fired up to play Nebraska, the whole Matt Rule dynamic there. And I don't like where that Michigan State game, mainly because of their bye, as you mentioned, Mike, and where it is on the calendar.
Did you just hear what he said? You just heard him say something that we've never heard but spoken before.
Wow.
Penn State will be fired up to play Rutgers.
I think
How has that ever been spoken, ever?
Well, it's because if the undefeated possibility is on the line and to close out and go into Big Ten championship game, the postseason with a win, I think Penn State will be fired up to play Rutgers.
Well, at least that doesn't look like a soft spot. You would think if things are going the way you want them to go, the way people want them to go, that doesn't look like a soft spot. And I said it depends what Michigan State becomes. I think it also depends what Indiana becomes. I mean, they did it a little bit with mirrors last year. Now they do have a new quarterback who is supposedly very dynamic. This is a very modern approach that this guy has, Cignetti. I mean, so if they have a big drop off, then it changes a little bit.
All right. So that's it. Penn State. The big takeaways. Landon Tengwall. The big takeaways. Landon Tengwall was great. If you're at this point, re-listen to that point of the podcast. Email the show, BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast @gmail.com. And the Nittany Lions, I want this to be the point. The Nittany Lions will be fired up to play Rutgers in the last game of the regular season. Forget about everything. Forget about preseason number 1, preseason number 2. The Nittany Lions will be fired up to play Rutgers.
Swamp to Jersey, baby. Swamp to Jersey.
For Frank Bodani, Mike Rose, want to give another shout out to Landon Tengwall. Thank him very much for coming on the show. I'm Andrew Klista. That does it for this edition. Non-conference schedule on tap next week as we get closer to the kickoff of Penn State football's 2025 campaign. Have a good one.